That verdict was so fast, and the first thing that comes to my mind is we should have gone to trial a long time ago.
Hey guys, welcome to Just Thought Lounge. My name is Kevin, and today we're taking a look at a fairly well-known case that seemed to be closed years ago, but just this year has reopened. This is the tragic story of Mike Cisco and Karen Harkness. In 2011, after nearly 10 years with no arrests and no progress, the American television series Dateline covered this cold case and took credit for being the first to uncover and name the prime suspect, Mike's ex-wife, Dana Chandler. Things moved a bit faster after that. The FBI became involved, and a case was formally compiled against Dana. She was eventually convicted on 2 counts of premeditated first-degree murder in 2012 and handed down 2 consecutive life sentences. In April 2018, however, the convictions were overturned. Today we're going to take a closer look at this case and how it all fell apart, including what new evidence has been uncovered since Dana's conviction and why her retrial in 2022 could very well end in her release. Mike Cisco and Dana Chandler were married for 15 years. They made their home in Topeka, Kansas, and had 2 children together, Haley and Duncan. Many of these years were turbulent, with reported alcohol abuse issues casting a shadow over the family and their happiness. When they decided to call it quits, the divorce was bitter and marked by extended court battles over the children. When it was all said and done, Mike had received the family home and the kids, and Dana was forced to pay child support, which was something she evidently struggled with. By 2002, she owed approximately $7,000 to Mike in back support. Police filings show that both had extramarital affairs. There's little known about the man with whom Dana was involved. However, Mike had his affair after the separation from Dana with a neighbor of theirs who was also married. The neighbor that Mike had been seeing during the separation would later report instances of harassment from Dana, including a confrontation at her church while she was there with her children. The police were called, but no arrest was made.
The divorce itself, Dustin, was it amicable or not?
No, it was quite a bit of a struggle, I'd say.
What is it that you remember about that?
Just hard times, arguments between my mom and dad quite a bit.
All right. Then the divorce lasted for a period of years. Did you always stay with Dad?
Yes.
Did Haley also always stay with Dad?
Yes.
After the divorce was finalized, Dana moved around quite a bit. First Arizona, then Lawrence, which is back in Kansas, then to Phoenix, which is in Arizona again. After that, in December 2001, she was in San Diego, California. By 2002, she was living in Denver, Colorado, which is about 8 hours away from Mike and her kids. Mike and the children had remained in Topeka, Kansas. In 2002, at the age of 47, he had been seeing Karen Harkness, who was 53 years old, for about 3 to 4 years. Karen was also a divorcee. She had 2 adult children, Chad Harkness and Aaron Sutton. Her relationship with her ex-husband was amicable. In fact, he still worked at the family business. Mike and Karen maintained separate homes. This was so that Mike could continue to independently raise Dustin and Haley. After raising 2 children of her own, Karen was not too keen to be a mother again, so she maintained a pleasant relationship with Haley and Dustin, but not a close one. The 2 were recently engaged and appeared very happy. Brochures found at their residence suggested they were planning a trip together to Jamaica. On the night of the 6th of July 2002, they were out at the Sac and Fox Casino. Security tapes showed them arriving at about 6:50 p.m. and then leaving at about 1:30 a.m. The casino was about 45 minutes from Karen's house. The next day, just before 2 p.m., Karen's father Harold and his wife Betty arrived at Karen's house to meet for a scheduled luncheon date. The front door was locked and no one was answering. Betty went around the side of the house and noticed that the gate was ajar and the back door not secured, so they made their way inside. That is when Mike and Karen were found. They had each been shot at least 5 times. They were in bed when it happened and said to be cold to the touch. The shooting likely occurred in the early morning hours. The location of some of the wounds, particularly on Karen, suggested to investigators that this was an emotional killing, one driven by personal rage and anger with an element of overkill. An independent consultant examining the case would conclude that the scene suggested the shooter had specific anger issues directed towards Karen. The crime scene was assessed by the Topeka Police Department, and an investigative assessment report was later published. It noted that the neighborhood was a low crime area. It was predominantly upper middle class. They also found no evidence of forced entry. They found that the rear door to the home could be opened even when locked by applying upward force to disengage the lock. Police initially thought that this could have been a robbery. Mike and Karen had won some money at the casino, so perhaps this was the motive. This initial theory was ruled out quite quickly, however, as evidence from the crime scene was compiled. The investigation found that nothing was taken or missing, which seemed to eliminate robbery as the motive. Karen was wearing jewelry, which included a diamond bracelet, a Rolex watch, and a gold ring. Mike's wallet was in his shorts. It contained 2 uncashed checks and about $950 in cash. There was cash within open view on the counter near to the bed. Karen's purse was on the kitchen counter. It had a billfold and $352 in cash. Mike's checkbook was on the dining room table, so if it was a robbery, then it wasn't very efficient. Police found 11 spent 9mm shell casings and a number of bullet fragments. The gun was never recovered and no fingerprints were found on the empty shell casings. Later on, a single hair would be found resting on top of one of the casings, a lone piece of DNA evidence in an otherwise clean scene. After interviewing family members and friends on the day Mike and Karen were found, investigators were directed immediately to Dana as a person of interest. Police contacted Dana on her cell phone that day and were immediately struck by her response to the news of her ex-husband's death. Dana told Detective Volley that she had last spoken to Mike on July 5th, 2 days prior, when she had called to speak with Dustin. It is what she did not do on this initial phone call, however, that spoke volumes to the detective. She did not ask any questions about the circumstances of Mike's death, when or where it happened, or if they had arrested anyone. She did not ask after her children. Indeed, the police reported that she made no attempt to reach them that night to check on their well-being. She also refused to tell Volley where she worked. Then, 3 days later, she retained an attorney, but agreed to a formal interview with police at her lawyer's office. Dana is thought to have lied her way through this first interview about both the large and small details. She says, for example, that she did not know that Dustin was on a canoeing trip that weekend, so she called to speak with him. Dustin would later testify that he had told his mother about the trip only a couple days prior in a memorable conversation that turned into a heated argument. Dustin told his mother that he could not join her in Denver on July 6th because of his canoeing trip. She accused him of choosing his youth church trip over her, screamed at him, then he hung up on her.
So either on Monday or Tuesday, July 1st or 2nd, 2002, the defendant called?
Yes.
What day did she tell you she was going to come to Topeka?
Saturday.
Saturday, July
6th.
All right. When she told you she was going to come to Topeka from Denver on Saturday, July 6, 2002.
Told her I was going on the canoe trip.
She claimed to be in Denver at the time of the shooting. She took a little road trip, which included an uncharacteristic hike through an unidentified trail and ended in Loveland, Colorado. She outlined extensively the number of stores she visited in the Denver area on that day in question, providing credit card statements as proof of these transactions. Notably, she mentioned purchasing only a cigarette lighter at one location. It was later discovered that Dana, perhaps conveniently, omitted the purchase of 2 5-gallon gas cans purchased alongside that lighter. At the interview, Dana was offered an opportunity to take a polygraph test. After consultation with her lawyer, she refused. In an effort to compile physical evidence, Dana was arrested in July 2002 on a child support warrant. Her black Mitsubishi Eclipse was seized and searched. The front seats removed and examined extensively.
And so you were looking to see if there was any of the defendant's blood on the seats?
Yes.
There was no evidence linking Dana to the murders found in the car. The next month, 2 individuals with extensive criminal records were caught with a forged check from Mike's bank account. They were attempting to use it at a quick shop. You'll recall that Mike's checkbook was found left at the scene, but this forgery was from a different account. In May 2003, Dana's hair was collected and compared with hair and fiber samples from the crime scene. The samples did not match. Left with no physical evidence to support suspicions against Dana, the case went cold and no arrests were made. The FBI became involved in the probe only after the case was featured on the CBS show 48 Hours in 2009, which sparked a renewed interest in solving the mystery.
Sit down and talk with you about this case because I think it's a fileable case. I think it's a winnable case. We need somebody to work it. And that's kind of how it started from there.
A strong circumstantial case is never as good as a strong scientific case.
They worked it for 2 years and finally decided, even though the case had problems, it was time to move.
This gets no better. This case is never going to get better than it is. It's right now today. At the end of the day, like Harry Truman said, the buck stops here.
On the 25th of July 2011, nearly a decade after the deadly double homicide, Dana Chandler was arrested in the parking lot of a fast food restaurant in Oklahoma and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. She would blame the crime show 48 Hours for tainting the media and, by extension, the public against her.
Hi, Dana. Harold Dow, CBS News.
We first reported on this story back in 2009 with our late colleague, Harold Dow. It was a cold case then.
Did you know anything about the death of Michael and Karen?
I have no idea what happened to Michael and Karen.
There's some people out here who think that you had something to do with it.
I know that.
48 Hours was first to publicly name Dana Chandler as the prime suspect.
A main focus of her first trial was her location at the time of the murders. There was extensive analysis of the route she supposedly took on her weekend road trip around Denver, and where she actually was during this period of time. Receipts and credit card statements confirmed Dana was in Denver at 2 p.m. on July 6th. Receipts also confirm she was in Loveland, Colorado, north of Denver, around 5 p.m. on July 7th. That leaves a gap of about 27 hours, which were undocumented. She provided at least 3 explanations about where she was during this time. During her July 2002 interview with Detective Volée, Dana said she left her house in Denver and drove through the mountains on I-70, traveling west towards Dillon, Colorado. She said she hiked near Granby and took Highway 34 to Estes Park. This route would have necessarily taken her through the Rocky Mountain National Park. At the entrance to the park, visitors are required to pay admission for cars to enter. They would also be recorded on video as they approach the gate and the exit. The recording from July 7th does not show Dana's car. In a separate version of events, in July 2002, Dana claimed to an acquaintance that she was in Denver all weekend. Then in August 2002, to another acquaintance of hers, she said that she had lied to police about her whereabouts because she did not think that they would believe her. She had bought gas in Denver and drove to Glenwood Springs, Craig, Steamboat, towards Fort Collins, and then back to Denver. The acquaintance asked if she had seen smoke from forest fires he recalled from television reports that weekend. Dana said no. The thing is, that weekend, the state had seen one of the worst forest fires on record, which would have been hard for anyone driving through to miss.
There's Glenwood Springs. There were fire in this area, and then there were some up in this area as well. And so that's the route from Denver up through Rifle, Meeker, and Hayden back over to I-25.
All right, thank you. What's this highway here?
This one?
Yeah.
Is I-70.
Dana was convicted in 2012 on limited circumstantial evidence. First, her inconsistent statements in interviews and her whereabouts over the weekend. Second, her gas purchases. The omission of the purchase of the gas cans on July 6th suggested to police that she used these 2 5-gallon containers in order to make the trip from Denver to Topeka with limited stops along the way so she could travel undetected. The third and very key element was her reported stalking of her ex-husband Mike and Karen. Dana appeared frequently, at times, in places where she was not expected.
Tell me the name of your father, please.
Mike Cisco.
And the name of your mom, please.
Dana Chandler.
The defendant in this case?
Yes. We're driving out of the parking lot. It was me, my dad, Karen, and my brother, and we were driving away, and my mom pulled up to the side of our car and started yelling at my dad and Karen and was really just completely crazy. I was blown away. I couldn't believe what I was actually seeing.
Several other witnesses testified about Dana's behavior toward Mike and Karen. Dustin testified he found her snooping through Mike's paperwork in the kitchen when she came to pick him up, even though he expected her to wait outside. He said his mother made him and Haley spy on their dad in 1999 or 2000 by sitting in the car outside Mike's home. And once, after Mike and Karen started dating, Dana drove from Lawrence to Karen's home in Topeka during a visitation, parked outside, and waited for an hour or 2. Confirmation of other stalking and harassing behavior was abundant.
Some of the alleged stalking circumstances, whether true or not, that were set forth during the trial include phone calls, sitting outside the victim's house, crawling in a window, sitting in a breezeway, jumping on a trampoline, hearsay statements that the victim said they were afraid of me and that the victims felt disturbed, threatened, or scared.
Mike's sister, Kathy Boots, testified that Mike told them he returned home in May 2002 to find Dana sitting inside the breezeway, and Dana told Mike they should live together again as a family. In one notable story, she reported Mike and Karen hearing Dana outside on their trampoline in the middle of the night, just jumping and laughing. Kathy believes that Dana first learned of Mike and Karen's engagement during a phone conversation when Mike was rejecting the idea that they reunite. These disturbing stories, compiled by multiple people close to the family, represent the strongest evidence against Dana. They would appear to give Dana a motive. This was further supported by notes made in Mike's own journal, in which he recorded instances of encountering Dana when she was found following and watching him. How did this case go from conviction to a reversal? The simple answer is an overzealous prosecutor who felt the pressure of a high-profile case that also lacked the evidence one would usually need to bring a charge across the line.
I knew that she had killed Mike and Karen, and I did not know that we'd be able to prove it. We didn't have fingerprints, we didn't have DNA, and we didn't have it in terms of forensic science.
The lead prosecutor, Jacqueline Spradling, went further than just stating that Dana was a stalker. She made the claim that Dana was also formally ruled by a judge prior to the murders to be dangerous. Spradling manifested a legal protective order that Mike had taken out against Dana, signed and confirmed by a judge, and told the jury at trial that such an order existed, as evidence that Dana was not just off balance about the relationship and behaving unstable, but was also a threat. No such order actually existed.
You'll agree that there was no protection from abuse order.
I'll agree that there was no protection from abuse order.
Even though you said there was.
Yes, sir.
Number one, you said something that wasn't true, that there was a protection from abuse order. Number two, you said that means that the judge agreed that the defendant was a danger, because that'd be the foundation for entering an order for protection from abuse. And number three, you said that the defendant ignored the order.
Yes, sir.
And none of that's true.
In addition, Spradling claimed that Dana was prompted or arranged specifically on that weekend because she had only just learned of Mike and Karen's engagement. There was no evidence to support this claim. Others said that Dana was aware of the engagement long before. However, Dana herself claimed she was only aware of the engagement in the aftermath of the murders.
Related to this sentencing hearing was about the prosecutor's speculation that I found out that Mike and Karen had gotten engaged, and that because I wanted to get back together with Mike, I killed them. I denied that I knew Mike and Karen were engaged prior to their murder, and I further denied that I wanted to get back together with Mike. But most importantly, I deny that I murdered Mike or Karen. I am innocent. I did not murder Mike or Karen.
Jacqueline Spradling was disbarred. Dana Chandler's conviction was thrown out. But that is not the end of the story. Topeka County has a retrial scheduled for August 2022. And Dana has far more support this time around. She's being backed by the Miracle of Innocence Project, which is a not-for-profit organization that seeks justice and comprehensive care for the innocent. Why would such an organization support Dana's legal fund if she was clearly guilty? Topeka Police Department checked with gas stations and convenience stores along the I-70 to disprove Dana's story. The plan was to track her on their suspected route, which ran through Nebraska to get her to Topeka and then back to Denver within the 27 hours. But they found that none of the stores along the route had any surveillance cameras. One clerk said she was 70% sure that she had seen Dana and could identify her car. That clerk sadly passed away in 2006 and would never testify formally at trial. The final piece of evidence used by the prosecution in Dana's first trial were recordings of jailhouse phone calls that she held with her sister Shirley while awaiting trial. They are curious and despicable, but only arguably incriminating. In one call, they discussed the passing of the clerk that had provided a partial identification of Dana on the I-70. Both women note that her death is huge for Dana's case. Dana says, and the prosecution keeps trying to sneak in what she said because that, little piece of information could potentially put me in Kansas. But that is the only thing. Because they got to at least put me in Kansas. At least. The prosecution in 2012 were not able to definitively place Dana in Kansas, despite referencing the clerk's earlier ID of her. And since Dana's conviction, new evidence in the form of cell phone records may very well support Dana's "I was in Denver the whole time" version after all. In 2002, police sourced Dana's cell phone records for the weekend of July 6th and 7th. The investigative report states that based on these records, Dana's phone received numerous calls over that weekend that went unanswered. The records show that she did not make or receive any calls from 3:15 p.m. on Saturday the 6th to almost 7:30 p.m. the next day on Sunday the 7th. However, it seems that cell phone tracking capabilities in the early 2000s are not what they are today, and a new analysis of cell phone records may paint a very different picture. Dana has advocates that believe new records will confirm the alibi that seemed so flimsy in her first trial.
Keen Umber is a local criminal defense attorney who has been studying the case for years. He's never represented Chandler criminally, but says he believes and has evidence to prove Chandler didn't commit the murders.
Not only do we believe in her innocence, we want the true killer of Mike Cisco and Karen Harkness to be brought to justice.
Umber says phone records prove she didn't do it.
1,200 pages of cell tower records verifies Dana Chandler's alibi that she was west of Denver the whole weekend.
The lack of any physical evidence and failure to recover the gun also leaves a gaping hole in this story. Lawyers working pro bono for Dana's legal defense have pushed forward on this front by exploring other suspects that they claim were never properly examined. Court documents obtained by a local Topeka newspaper state that a judge found probable cause to issue a search warrant for DNA from a man named Jeff Sutton. Jeff is the son-in-law of Karen Harkness, married to her daughter, Erin. Jeff, according to the Topeka Capital Journal, has a history of anger-fueled crimes, financial issues, and it was suspected that he had possession of a 9mm Uzi-style weapon, similar to one used on that July weekend in 2002. Jeff Sutton was a lawyer and former Waubonsee County attorney. He worked in that office until January 1997. Before leaving, he reportedly arranged a deal with the county sheriff to receive 2 firearms that had been forfeited in previous cases as payment for his services. The 2 guns were then transferred to his office, but not noted in the formal inventory. This was according to 3 witnesses in law enforcement that worked there at the time. All 3 now deny their statements. An extensive dossier on his past and potential as a suspect was compiled in the years prior to Dana's first trial and handed over to authorities in 2009 and 2012. Jeff and Erin lived an hour away from the murder scene at the time it took place. Erin Sutton said the couple went with friends to a comedy club on the night her mother was killed, and the couple was in bed at the time of the shooting. Having married 9 months before, Jeff is said to have benefited financially from the inheritance. Dana Chandler's retrial date has been set for August 2022. Although she has accepted the assistance of legal counsel from the Miracle of Innocence Project, she has decided to represent herself from this point onwards. The stories from those who knew her prior to this horrific crime taking place paint a picture of an awful, unbalanced woman and uncaring mother. The question this summer will be, can it be proved, once again, that she is also a murderer? Thank you all so much for joining me once again here in the lounge. My name is Kevin, this is Just Thought Lounge, and I'll see you in the next one.
Oh my God, she stabbed herself.
Where?
She fell in a knife. Oh no, her knife's sticking out.
What?
There's a knife sticking out of her heart.
Oh, she stabbed herself?
I guess so. I don't know where she fell on it. I don't know.
Okay, well, don't touch it.